What's going on, guys? Sensible Prepper Live. We're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about some things that may be a reality check, maybe something on either side, whether you're not really all that concerned and you're just kind of looking and you're interested, or whether you're fully, absolutely, totally delusional. There is a lot in between. We are the human race, and there are people that go to the extreme. So let's find out, let's talk about being a prepper. Obviously, this channel is Sensible Prepper, so that should give you a little bit of an idea. In fact, we have a Sensible Prepper t-shirt we've just released on suitsgear.com. Check it out. We have a big sweepstakes over there that's going on at suitsgear.com. Check it out. And we're introducing our new shirts and ball caps. Got to do it. YouTube algorithms are kind of sliding. So that's fine, because this is the best platform. We love YouTube, actually. But we're going to talk about, are preppers crazy? And there are a lot of people that feel that preppers are crazy. But I will say that over the past few years, that has changed. But let's talk about, well, first, let's go ahead and talk about Exotac. Guys, you've got, and this is, you're crazy not to have a fire kit. And why do I say that? Well, you've got to have something. This is primal. This is something that man has had from the beginning. And a lot of people just don't have the ability to create a fire. You might have a Bic lighter and some paper, but that's a very difficult way to start a fire. Having a good fire kit with multiple tools in it is really vital for survival. And it can boil your water, cooks your food, gives you heat, gives you light, keeps predators at bay. And Exotac makes the best fire kits or fire starting tools on the market. They're made down in Winder, Georgia. They give you a 20% discount using Suits20 with the link down below in the description. So we really appreciate Exotac. And I know a lot of you guys have used it. Guys, if you haven't, and you don't necessarily have to go with Exotac, you can go with some cheaper options, but these are the best. And we've loved Exotac for many years. And we really appreciate those guys. So we're going to talk about prepping. And I don't know if you're a seasoned prepper, or if you're a person that is even started prepping. And, you go into a grocery store, or you go into Costco or Sam's or Walmart or wherever you shop, and you're filling your buggy up with preparedness items. A lot of times you can get some strange looks. Or you think you're getting strange looks because, you're doing this, and it's kind of funny. It's one of those things you don't necessarily want to be identified as a prepper, because there is some connotation to it that you're just paranoid, that you're worried, that, friends, when you have friends, you're careful, not necessarily to maybe talk about it. Now, there's an element there that's very important. If you are a prepper, you don't want to necessarily for all your neighbors and everybody to know that you're prepping, because that is something that you're doing, and you're having the supplies, you're preparing, you're doing things, and you don't necessarily want for the whole community to know. So in case something goes down, because if you are a prepper and you have good friends that know you are, that aren't preppers, I know where I'm going when things go south. And that's one thing you get a lot of times. And what my response is, not unless you bring food and supplies. If you do that, then you're welcome. If you don't, you're just a drain on all the work that I put into this. Now, there are different degrees of prepping, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the dangers of mental and emotional dangers that can happen for those who are prepping, because there are some out there. But we're going to talk a little bit about why. Number one, why I became a prepper. And some of you may say, well, what in the world, did you just one day start going, oh my gosh, I need to start prepping? No. I grew up in a very conservative Christian background, and Southern Baptist. And Revelation was one that a lot of people looked at, as far as the end of the world. Now, before I get into that, there's most religions, if not all religions, have a belief that sooner or later there's going to be some kind of tribulation, catastrophe, apocalypse. And so that is inherent. So for me, I would read this, and we're going to talk about this specifically in a minute, because if you're not careful, you can take even that and you can turn it into fear and hoarding and all those kind of things. So we're going to talk about that. But let's talk about some reasons why there are preppers. Now, what's funny is that in the U.S. right now, prepping has become more mainstream. More people are prepping than ever. In fact, 10% of all adults consider themselves preppers in some degree. That's a pretty large number of people. That's millions of people that are actively prepping. Obviously, with the channel, I mean, we have a lot of people, and there's some much bigger channels that are preppers. And a lot of people do watch this because they are learning and wanting to know how to prep. And here's the thing, guys. Again, my deal is sensible prepping, but there has to be some motivation to get me to where I'm going. I'll never forget. In fact, Seth's in here right now. When he was a young boy, we were fixing some things. We were reorganizing some long-term food that we had put back. And we're in the garage, we're moving some boxes around. And he looked at me and he said, "Dad, why do you have all this? What is this for? I mean, or what are you worried about?" And, and I looked at him, I said, "Let me tell you," I said, "I have guns, I have skills. I've been taking martial arts for most of my life and wrestled and did all this stuff, boxing, just have a lot of that, track, did all these things." And I said, "There's nothing stopping me if I look down at you and your brother and sister and Shannon, and I go, they're hungry. They don't have food. There's nothing stopping me from going up and down our road and just taking whatever I want." Now, that's not an option. I'm a Christian. I'm not going to do that. That's stealing. That's just, it's horrible to even think that, even though there are people out there that is their plan. They're going to take. They don't have something, they're going to take it. And I said, so this just keeps me from the temptation of doing that if it's a grid down situation. I said, but here's the thing. If it's not, then we have some food put back and we can eat that if we want, and we can have food. But it's not really, except for some financial investment, it's worth it to me. It's insurance. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." One thing is if you are prepping, is to make sure that your kids are on board and that they understand the reasons why you do that. Now, also, I grew up in the Cold War era. So there were times where even at school, I'll never forget, we'd have drills and they'd have the drill and you'd have to get under your desk and, do all this stuff. So there is a kind of a lineage of somewhat of fear. A lot of times governments kind of push that a little bit because it kind of keeps us a little bit in line. But the one thing is prepping, though, can lead to being delusional. You can get paranoid. It can have antisocial tendencies. You start to go, "Oh, this is happening. This is happening." The problem right now that we're facing more than ever is social media, because if you're clicking on certain mindsets, certain things, it will feed you more and more of those things. And before long, you are out of your mind. When COVID hit, one of those things where people just, normal, average, everyday people became absolutely delusional. Listen, how many of you have seen people driving down the road, even today in 2025, with a mask on by themselves in a car? Not affecting anyone. I mean, and that is it's just like a part of their clothing. When they put on a shirt, they put on a mask. Now, if you're one of those people, take the mask off. Just live life, and this is to speak also to those who are prepping. Listen, if you are completely absorbed in prepping and you think that everything that you watch on the news is coming and it's going to be the end of the world, take a step back, take a deep breath. Few years ago, I had a lady. In fact, this was when I first started my prepping channel. Lady got in touch with me. She said, we're worried. We're so upset. We don't know what to do. And she said, we see these videos where it says, if you haven't already stocked up, it's too late. Now, take in mind that I started my channel in 2010. So I was looking and I got in touch with her. She goes, we have a boat. We're down in Florida. We have this big boat. We're going to sell it and buy food. What do you think? Do you think we need to do that? Do you think we need to? And I told her, I said, the first thing I'm going to tell you is take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath. Hold on. I said, I'm not telling you to sell your boat or not sell your boat. I said, but don't panic. Don't just lose your mind. I said, just stop and consider a lot of things. If you feel like that you need to do some things, then by all means do them. But if you're going to get panicked and completely lose control, you need to step back. So with that being said, there are, early in the 70s, 60s, there started this really strong survival movement. In fact, even the hippies, they'd go to these communes and they would grow their own food, and they would, kind of hang out and have this peace and love kind of place. But then you had the more aggressive survivalists who were stocking up food, stocking up weapons, doing all this stuff, and people just looked at them as absolute crazy nuts. Now, part of that was, again, Cold War. Part of that is concerned about a World War III, nuclear war, and and there was definitely a possibility. There was a threat there, but you've got to be careful not to go beyond reality. That living life is important. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm not telling you that you shouldn't prepare, because for me, obviously, I'm a prepper. And I have reasons for being a prepper, but I also have to step back at times and go, okay, is this what I need to think about? A few years ago during the election, especially when the election with Trump in 2020, and a lot of people got paranoid about things, and they said, oh, the government's going to do this, and this is happening, and the army's going to come in. And there was a lot of talk with a lot of people we knew that were bringing up all these conspiracy theories and, just worried about things. And my wife would come to me and she'd say, did you hear this? This happened. So-and-so called me. So-and-so is worried about this. Hey, have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? And finally, I just said, please, I said, stop listening to that. I said, we're fine, but stop listening to that. I said, that's just going to get you all worked up, and there's not really a lot you can do about it. And one thing you need to always think about is when you're on the ground level and you're right here, sometimes you can get kind of overwhelmed. Take a step back and look above and get that 30,000 viewpoint and go, okay, yes, things are happening across the country here and there, but what is it that's affecting me right here? And how can I do what I can do just to ensure a survivability? So one thing that's happened lately is with climate change. Of course, this has been going on for a long time. And of course, I was around when the first Earth Day came, and they were calling for the imminent ice age. The ice age is coming. It's going to take over the earth, the ice age, the ice age. Then it changed to, global warming. Global warming is going to take over the earth. And then it got to be just climate change. So they could just use anything to plug it in. And our carbon footprint, and, cows are taking, are killing the carbon. And, and there's all this like banter and just craziness. Very similar to what happened with COVID. It was a panic. Now, there were a lot of people that did die from COVID, but a lot of those people were already on that element. And now we're finding out that there's a lot of stuff that we were told to trust the science when the science wasn't even being used. So be careful what the authorities are throwing out there at you, because sometimes they don't even know. And you can direct your whole life. I mean, with COVID, even though, it was a bad situation, it was way overblown. And then a lot of people went out and got vaccines and got all this stuff. And then it just became this huge thing. And then now all this stuff is coming out, that there was a lot that they just didn't know. Understand, because I was in it, and I did have some concern. And I was like, at first I was going, okay. And then I stepped back and I went, wait a minute, we've got food, we have water, we have some supplies, we even had toilet paper. And so we just kind of stepped back. And the one thing about doing any prepping is that it will give you a sense of, okay, we're good right now. And that is probably one of the biggest pluses for prepping. Don't be scared, be prepared. You don't have to go nuts. You don't have to go crazy, but just be prepared. Think about things, with the news, you've got pandemics, you've got all these conspiracies. We have the New World Order. Listen, I'm as concerned about the New World Order as anyone. I'm very much against global governance. I think it leads to totalitarianism. Is that happening now? in background areas, yes, there is a move for that. And we all know it, the Illuminati, you know. And so we start to get all this information and it starts to pour in. And guys, we make bad choices because we're allowing outside influences to direct our actions. You need to step back from that and go, okay, you know what? There is nothing I can do about a global government. Nothing I can do about it. I mean, I can elect good officials. I can do my part, whatever I can do. But, you know, the Illuminati, you know, oh, somebody had a hand sign like this. And that, yes, it's out there. It's definitely out there. But don't let it control your daily life. Again, prepping, doing some things, smart move to me. And it's more people. I did a video a few years ago. It said, preppers are crazy, but they're not as crazy as they used to be. And really what we were saying is guys, you need to prep, but you don't need to go crazy. But there are some reasons to prep. There are some definite reasons to prep. You know, there are some terms that we like to throw around. Doomsday, SHTF, grid down, economic collapse. All these things are real. I mean, they can definitely happen. In fact, that's one of the things, and I have to bring this book up. I finally put an Amazon link at the bottom because I bring this book up all the time. This is actual events that happened in Argentina back in 2001 when they had an economic collapse. And it's eye-opening. Did it end the world in Argentina? No. But there were a lot of things that happened down there. And this is the Modern Survival Guide for the Coming Economic Collapse. I highly recommend it. Again, we have it down in the Amazon link, and it'll change your mind about some of the things with prepping. It did me. It kind of changed the way I looked at things and on a little more practical level. And so, and then some of the dangers of some of the thoughts that I had previously of possibly bugging out and finding a place and running to it, and then finding that these gangs and these groups would follow them up there and kill them and take their supplies, or at least just take their supplies. So reading good books. One thing I think is good is to be grounded, you know, seeing things that are happening and kind of step back and analyze it and not have this sense of reaction, but kind of go, okay, we need to think about this. How is this going to affect us? We call it the threat assessment. And for our prepper group, we have a threat assessment. What are threats that are possible in our area, in what we are, who we are, what are these threats, and then how do we prepare for them? For us, you know, hurricanes, you know, tornadoes, things like that, earthquakes on the West Coast, you know, wildfires on the West, but we've had the wildfires as well. Those are things that just happen, and really you need to be somewhat prepared for them because they tend to happen on a regular basis, not necessarily even yearly, but they happen. When National Geographic put out Doomsday Preppers, I was asked by Nat Geo to be one on the pilot episode. And I told him, I said, guys, while I am associated with that, and I do have some tendencies to that, I am not a bunker guy. I don't have stockpiles of all this stuff piled up mile high. And, you know, I'm not, but I recommended some people that I know that they're not crazy either, but they just are a little bit more into that really strong community. And Doomsday Preppers, though, changed the opinion of a lot of people. Now, you would look at Doomsday Preppers and go, man, that guy, what in the heck? You know, I mean, he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on bunkers and food and a compound and all this stuff. But yet there's something to it. We had a good friend of ours, because obviously being on YouTube and just being vocal, because to me, the better my neighbor's prepared, the better I'm prepared. So I'm willing to stand up and go, hey, you know, these are some things you need to think about. There was this one girl that we knew, and I'd known her since she was a kid, and she was an adult by this time, had kids, and she looked at her sister-in-law and she said, you know, she goes, what's up with Don? He's like this prepper. He's always preparing and doing stuff. And he was like, well, why does he do that? And so this girl told us, she said, yeah, she told us about this. She was a little bit concerned, and she kind of laughed because she was a prepper herself, and the girl didn't know it. And so after she watched Doomsday Preppers, and she put in the comments where she had watched it, and she said, you know, I thought those people were crazy. She says, but after watching Doomsday Preppers, it made me think. She goes, so if something really was to happen, I know where I'm going. And my wife commented, don't even think about it. So, but it did change. It did change the perception. One thing I thought was funny is I would go to a big show, maybe NRA or wherever, and these guys that were maybe CEOs of big companies would come up to me and they'd say, I've got my bug out bag. You know, I've done some prepping, and they wanted it to be on the down low, not necessarily just because they thought people would know it. I mean, you know, that somebody'd come to their house, but they didn't want for their peers to even know they were prepping, that might be crazy or something. But then it got to be where everybody was like, I got my bag, I've got my bug out bag, you know, I've got my get home bag, I've got some stuff put back, and people became more vocal. And honestly, as much as Doomsday Preppers showed a lot of stuff that was kind of like a little bit delusional, to be honest, there was some nuggets in there that made people think. And so I really appreciate it. And then you have the end of the world as we know it. And of course, that was, you know, REM put that song, Tiawaki, and a lot of people use that term. For me, when I first, growing up, and Revelation was a part of that, and that means the tribulation, which if you're a Christian, you know that there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the tribulation, the apocalypse, you know, Armageddon. And of course, you know, a lot of people, and myself included, believe that, you know, we're going to be not necessarily here when all that happens. But it does put some concern with you, and it's part of your psyche if you're not careful. But the one thing to remember is that if you are reading, if you really have that faith, then you should also know that there is God that's there to help you through those things. Doesn't mean that you don't prepare. Noah prepared. Noah built a big boat. So, you know, it doesn't give you an out. The other thing is, a lot of people say, well, you know, there'll be the rapture and people will be taken up, so I'm not worried about it. Tell that to the Christians in Sudan who were hacked to death with machetes in their village. You go through things. So it's great. It's really smart to have some preparation for the areas that you live in. But here's the thing. This is the thing. I really believe it's going to happen sooner or later. That's my belief. I really believe it'll happen. But here's the caveat. What is the timing? If I'm not careful, I go, oh, New World Order. Oh, the government's going to take over everything. Oh, we're going to live under a totalitarian government. Oh, food is going to, the climate's going to take away all our food, or the economy's going to crash, or look, here's a sign, here's a sign, here's a sign, you know, and we get like, oh, and we're running around, and it's about timing. Guys, a lot of this stuff is, yes, it is developing over time, but are you even going to be alive to have to face it? Is it something that's happening now? Now, there are definitely things that happen. There's civil unrest. There's something, George Floyd. I mean, if you lived in Minneapolis, it was SHTF. People dealt with that. And so there are possibilities that don't necessarily affect everything. In fact, I call it my personal SHTF. What happens to me can affect just me. It's one of the cool things about a bug out bag or a get home bag. I keep one in my car. Constantly, when I'm out on the road or I'm doing something, I need something, and I go, oh, you know what? I've got something in my bag. Did that this past weekend. I was up at GOA in Knoxville at the big event, the Goals event, which I highly recommend. There were things that I ended up going, oh, you know what? I've got that in my bag. I've got a multi-tool in my bag. I've got, you know, a heavy meal trash bag because I need it for something here. And I found myself using my get home bag for everyday practical uses. This is the thing, guys. My bag, I have it prepared. Yes, I can survive for a while just because I have this bag. But there are just little things that happen on a regular basis where I find that I need things. The key is to put them back, because one of the problems is you take it and you pull it out and then you don't put it back. Then you go, oh, I need this. I remember one time we were at a big family event. My father-in-law had this big, huge stack of wood. We were going to do this big bonfire. And so he was looking around, and then finally he pulls out a can of gasoline. And I said, whoa, 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 whoa. So I go and I get my bag, I pull out my fire kit, I go up, I get my tinder out, I start the fire, and then before long we had this big bonfire, and everybody's going, wow, that was cool, that was cool. You can be the hero at a bonfire, but having the ability to create fire is one of those things that you need to have. And that's why I do promote fire kits, guys. Fire kits are important for any kind of use. Okay, so timing. Don't panic. Panic is your worst enemy. Panic makes you make decisions that are out of control. Hoarding. If you're so wrapped up in this is going to happen, this is getting ready to happen, you start hoarding stuff. And when I say hoarding, that doesn't mean that you don't have supplies put back. You do. You should have supplies put back. But it does mean that you're not just buying things, you're buying them. Oh, I need this, I need this, I need this. And then before long, you're impulse buying. And so having a system and a plan to go, okay, if something were to happen, how am I going to address those issues? Now, we're going to go to some questions here, even though I've still got a lot to do because I want to give Sarah Mack a heads up. So you don't want to get extremely paranoid, because when you get paranoid, you start to lose touch with reality. There are a lot of you guys out there that are prepping, that are mindful, that are thinking, but you know what? You need to take a vacation every year. You need to kind of take some time off. You need to enjoy things. Now, on the other side of that, being a prepper, go out and play golf, spend it. Instead of that, that is not your thing. Your thing is to go to the range, or your thing is to take your family out and go on a camping trip or go hiking and improve your abilities to prep. That's important. That's more important. For a guy that likes to play golf, what does that really do for him besides give him some relaxation? Of course, it usually frustrates the heck out of me. But, it's a lot of fun. I love to get out and do that. But my thing is more toward the prepping. It's not one over the other. It's just this is what I like to do. I like to go out and shoot. I like the prepping thought. I like to be more self-sufficient. I like to be more able to do things. That honestly becomes my hobby. But you want to make sure that it doesn't become your obsession. Just like with golf. You got guys that want to play golf every day, and it's expensive. But that's their choice. Okay, we have some questions.
Okay, so first we have David M.N. with a super chat of $20.
David? Oh, David, thank you.
Thanks for being you. And Jesus was so clear that not even he knew the end of the world was coming. I will live for him, hopefully be used by him in other lives and expand his kingdom.
And thank you, David. Of course, David's one of our Patreon members. Love David. Here's the thing, and I totally agree. We get off track with helping others. We get so self-absorbed in what we're doing. And I'll just leave this little thing. We are doing, one of the things we think about is, if something were to happen, how can we help others? Maybe have a soup kitchen, maybe do something for others, maybe have some supplies that we can give and trade and do whatever. Don't get too like, this is my stuff and I bought it, and just be careful with that. Another side of it is, though, is people go, well, if you start showing you have food, people are going to come take it. Well, that's why we have firearms.
Billy Rose says, question, given the situation of our national economy and the current threat, both internationally and domestic, who should we turn to for accurate and actionable information?
That's a good question. That is a very good question. First off, I just want to use this because this is my belief system, is that I believe that God gives all wisdom. So I try to first kind of say, okay, is this what I need to do? Give me wisdom in this situation, because what happens is before long, you can get all paranoid and freaked out. You go to Fox News, it's just where they take a more conservative bent, they're still out there. So I like to get more practical information. And it's funny because if I'm not careful, I'm getting a lot of my information on Instagram or TikTok, and it'll have articles, and all that does is feed into my worry. Honestly, it's called doom scrolling. So one group that I really like is Epoch Times or Epoch Times. I like their approach. They have a lot of good information. They kind of talk about things on a more level basis. And there have been some others. I think Newsmax has been a good source. So, finding that right source. But I'll just be honest. One of the things, and I've told my group this, as far as, don't worry, we have a higher power that's watching over us. Doesn't mean that we don't prepare. It just means that we use that guidance to put us in the right place. And then, when something comes up, I kind of go, yeah, I don't think that might be the way that it's really going. Because, and two, trying to put different sources together. Listen, be careful though. If you're very conservative, be careful not to just get locked into that. Look at some of the more open, progressive, and it'll help you to kind of balance a little bit. And a lot of times it'll help you to go, what the heck were they thinking? And so, I think one of the things is to give it some balance with the different news sources you're living to or listening to, because what happens is you get locked in and then you want that to happen. We don't want it. We want to stay balanced. So I think using multiple sources. To say that I have one particular, I don't. I do like some of the commentaries and some of the different guys that are out there that are more sensible, but there's not one that I just listen to.
Faisal Alamari says, hi, watching you from Saudi Arabia. I like your videos. Hope you give more attention to urban prepping where bugging out to the woods is not an option. Thanks and keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Listen, and one of the things that I'm big about is bunkering in, and that means staying in the place. And one thing is too, is this book about Argentina, that's what it's really about. It's about urban survival, and it's about staying in. He stayed in Buenos Aires. The one thing that he said that really saved him was his apartment building. The people came together and they provided security for each other. They traded things, they worked together, and a prepping group is very important. So that's definitely something that but urban survival is definitely something that we like to touch on. So we'll look into doing more of that.
John Klink says, water. We store water and change every 6 months. What is the long term for water?
Really some kind of rain catchment system or a well or a natural spring. You need to have that water source. The problem with most creeks and water sources is that they're not safe. They're not safe just to drink. Unless you're on the top of a mountain and you're getting a fresh source of water. Even we were in Knoxville in the Smoky Mountains, and there was beautiful streams, and I'm like, those aren't safe to drink. They have cryptosporidium, giardia. You don't know what's up the creek and the river. There could be a dead cow up there. I had a friend of mine that was canoeing, and he came up, and a guy was going to drink some water. He said, no, don't do that. And then about a mile later, they came, and there was a dead cow in the water because there was cattle around there. You got to be careful. So I like to have rain catchment. Now, rain catchment on your roof is great, except that when it's coming off the shingles, it can have acetone in it. And you can purify it out. You can. But also setting up a rain catchment system that just is standalone, where you have a large tarp, it brings in the water. I'm going to tell you guys, water will fill that 50-gallon barrel up in a hurry when it's a rainstorm. But having a natural spring and making sure that it's tested, or having a well. Wells are great. Now, of course, you need power for your well, so you have a solar backup system in case that goes, or you have a hand pump. And sometimes hand pumps can be a lot of work, but hand pumps are also something that can be used. But to me, we have a natural spring we have two actually on our property. And that's one thing that is a great resource to be able to get good, clean, fresh water. So those are pretty much the ways to do it. But I agree. I think you should be storing water. You should be rotating it out. And because here's the thing about any kind of prepping situation is that it's a lot of hard work. When we had Helene come through and we had our power out for a week and trees were down, and it was a lot of work pulling out the solar panels, getting the generator set up, running it at times, making sure that we had everything charging, our light systems, which we had. We made sure that the solar panels were out there in the sun, getting that, and just preparing food was a chore. because we couldn't use our electric stove, which made us think we need a propane stove. So a lot of different things about working. So there, but water is vital. Water is probably number one. One of the things that I was talking to a buddy of mine that has a rain catchment system, and we were talking about it, and he's the one that brought up the acetone. And he said, here's the deal. If the water from your roof has a little acetone in it, and he goes, and you have no other water, you've got to drink that water. That water is going to give you life-saving ability. It may have causes and effects later on down the road. He goes, but you've got to live today. So, and especially if you're in an arid environment. And unfortunately, a lot of municipalities outlaw rain catchment systems. So, but having the ability to set up one, even in an impromptu, where you can take a tarp and you can set it up into a V shape and have a bucket at the bottom or some kind of way to collect that water, that's going to be one that, as long as it rains, you're going to be in decent shape. Okay, we're going to come back to some more questions in a second, but we're going to go ahead and go into prepping, some degrees of prepping. Now, one thing I've noticed is a lot of people, you may not consider yourself a prepper. You just may be listening just to kind of get some information. You may be a storm prepper. You have a storm. We just got back from Florida, and those people down there, they build concrete houses, to withstand hurricanes. They build more toward that. They're more prepared toward that. They have, different things to get them through a hurricane. Because here's one of the things, guys, and I always say this: if a crisis comes, people are sitting around like this. The crisis comes, but people are still asleep. And then all of a sudden, when they start to realize it and it starts to go up, it's too late to prepare. So you always see these guys when the hurricane, in fact, the hurricane's coming right now. There are people, I'm sure, that are running down to Home Depot and Lowe's that are buying up wood and everything else at the last minute when they know that the hurricanes are going to come. So don't be that person. Go ahead and have some things set aside. But they're the natural disaster guys, whatever it is. There are guys in that same category that are they have their roadside emergency stuff in their vehicles because they know that there's a possibility they could break down. And so they do these basic things. Maybe at their home, they have a fire extinguisher. They have if they have a 2-story house, they have a ladder they can escape from. And they have other things that they take care of. That's prepping. That is just basic prepping. And people, if you're not doing at least that, you should be having a toolbox. Even if you live in an apartment, have a little toolbox, have some tools if you need to fix something or do something. Then there's the next level, which you're that kind of prepper, but then you're self-defense prepper. You're worried about things with crime as it goes up. You're kind of looking and you're going, hey, we need to be prepared at our home. Or I need to have a concealed carry. I need to have my EDC. I need to have a knife and a flashlight on me. That's another form of prepping. And so it just gives you the tools you need to just have a better day. Could you make it? Could you live without a flashlight or a knife? Yeah, but it makes life easier. And I find myself, now that I carry a flashlight and knife, that there's so many times where I'm using it and it just makes things easier. It just makes life easier. And of course, having your billfold wallet and phone are definitely part of it. Okay, and then there are those that are more survival minded. They're thinking, there are things out there that can happen. So let's stock up on some food. There may be some indicators, like maybe some political unrest is kind of boiling underneath the surface, or maybe the economy is maybe not doing what they think it should do. They're just a little concerned, and they're going out and they're kind of putting something toward that. Some water. Listen, guys, you live 3 days without water. That's it. 3 days. I mean, you can live longer, but then your body starts to dehydrate. You've got to have water. You've got to have medical supplies. You need to have some things to be able to take care of you in case there's a disruption in emergency services or it's overwhelmed. And so you want to have a few things set back, even for trauma, and putting some of that stuff back. It goes with the rule of threes. You can live 3 minutes without air. You can live 3 hours in extreme harsh conditions, includes winter or heat. Then you live 3 days without water. That means you've got to have water. That's got to be a priority. And then you have 3 weeks without food. Now, food, you can live longer, but that's just a rule of thumb, and your body's starting to break down after 3 weeks. Medical and self-defense flow all in between. That's how I do all of my preps, even a small get-home bag or at home. I think about my preps. One thing that a lot of people do is they'll take that bug out bag. This is their prep. FEMA recommends having an emergency kit at your house. FEMA.gov. Emergency kit at your house and a portable emergency kit in case you have to evacuate. If the government is saying this is really what you should be doing, at least do that. Now, they're not going to talk about firearms, but well, maybe with Trump in office, they might. But that is one thing, is to just kind of have some things put back. Man, you know what? I've got a week's worth of food. What's crazy is a lot of homes have like about 2 or 3 days worth of food, and that's it. They may have a bunch of other stuff. But what do you have in your home that can last? If you are locked down in your home, which we had that before, if you're locked down in your home and there's no other resupply, how long can you live? Can you live a month? Well, let me say this. If you can live a month, then that'll give you a month to make better decisions, or it goes to more of a new normal. Anything you do, and this is one thing I try to always bring up, is whatever you do to prep buys you time. You can't prep enough for a SHTF, Doomsday, everything's going to heck. You just can't prep that much. But what you can do is to prep enough to where there could possibly be a new normal. And then you can make better decisions. And it keeps you from panicking and just going out of your mind. So first is, and I base all my preps on the rule 3. So here we are. We're kind of like that meal, we're kind of dabbling a little bit. We're putting a little bit of food back. We're kind of putting some supplies back, but we're not going too crazy. Maybe we don't have enough room to do it. Then we go into the full survival mode. We look at things and we go, you know what? This place is going to hell in a handbasket. What are we going to do? We got to get our food stacked up. We got to get our water stocked up. I'm not there. I'm kind of in between that, but I am definitely stock it up, put it in. We need to have it ready. I've got family members. I want them to survive. I want to, in case something really happens, I'm looking at the different signs and I'm going, here's some things that are going on. Here's some possibilities. It validates what I do. But the problem is, and this is the next level, is that you start to do that. And then you're like, you call your buddy. Have you seen this? Did you see this? What about this? You think this is going to happen? I think, man, on Tuesday, they're talking about the end of the world. Listen, there are guys that are on there right now on YouTube saying that by, August 31st, if you haven't done this, you're going, it's too late. It's all over. There were people when I first started my Sensible Prepper channel, when I first started my Suits channel, I've been doing this 16 years. And when I first started, they were saying that if you haven't already purchased your supplies, it's too late. And it's 16 years later. And guess what? They were wrong. What I would say to you is to go to the store and do a little bit. And then the next time, do a little bit and do a little bit. And then before long, you'll go, wow, I've got a little nice stock of food and supplies here. And that'll get you started, and it'll give you some peace of mind because you want to be prepared, not scared. But what happens is a lot of people start, and then they start looking at, look what Russia's doing. They may send a nuclear. Look at Iran. Look at North Korea. Look at what's going on. Look at the economy. Look at the stock market. There's a new pandemic coming. And before long, you are so paranoid and completely consumed that you just run out and you start wasting your resources. And then you become actually unlivable, where people come around you and you're so locked into what you're fearing, your fear, that you're paralyzed, except to do more. And then you're being fed all this stuff. You've got to back off from that. You've got to back off. Again, this channel's Sensible Prepping. I'm big about prepping. I think you need to have a year's supply of food. I will, if you asked me, you said, so what do you think? I'd say a year's supply of food. That's a lot. It's expensive, and it needs to be balanced, and it needs to be rotated. It's a lot of work. I'd say you need to have water sources. Our friend of ours that just sent the message said, hey, what about water? What's the long-term storage? You need to have some ability in case things go down. Too, water's that important. You need to have some medical supplies. You need to think about herbal medicines, and we do that. We have a number of different things. My wife was an RN for many years, but she's gotten into more natural remedies and how to fix this, how to do this without going to store-bought items. Or they could be store-bought, they're just natural. And we need to have a way to do that. So for us is we don't get in that Chicken Little kind of mentality. We get into we see the signs. We see the dangers. We know things can happen. Let's prepare accordingly. And then let's do it sensibly. And then let's talk to others about it. And then just because the better I'm prepared, again, the better my neighbor's prepared. So this is the deal. Prepping buys you time. That's the big message, is prepping just buys you time to not panic, to not be over worried, to not get paranoid. When COVID hit, at first, I started hearing about it from people I know in China. And they said, Don, you need to really take note of this. We're having some serious issues here. And once the Chinese New Year or their Spring Festival is over, a lot of China, over 300,000 students come to the U.S. from China. They're going to bring it. And sure enough, they did. And there's a lot of back and forth about who did what, but the people, the students that came over here, it wasn't a conspiracy. They just came over here because that's what they did, and they brought it with them. So you've got to be careful to be prepared. But once I looked at it, I just went, okay, we've got food, we've got supplies. If we need to hunker down, we can. And we did. Did I get COVID? Yes, I got it twice. I think I'm just getting over it again. There's some strands floating around. They're weaker. They're not as bad, but they're out there. Even then, people are still paranoid about what happened back in 2020. You've got to be able to detach yourself to a point. And you've got to be, because honestly, you will go crazy. You will become paranoid. You'll have antisocial behavior where you don't want to be around people. You look at them as a threat to your supplies and your resources. It takes away from who you are. Is life worth living at that point? Having the ability to look at things and go, hey, you know what? I want to help others. And that's one thing about Helene. Helene was an SHTF up in Western North Carolina and Tennessee, Eastern Tennessee. It was an SHTF. People lost their lives. Lots of people lost their lives. People that were huge preppers that had food stored back, had homesteads washed away. There are things out there, but you've got to be sensible about it, and you've got to think it through. What happens when everything washes away? And one thing that I thought was beautiful, though, is how many people came together and started helping each other, sacrificing time, sacrificing resources, and begin to help each other. Guys, that is the only way it's going to work. If you're a lone wolf prepper, if you're like, it's mine, I'm here, I'm going to lock my stuff down. And listen, I understand. I put a lot of money into what we have. But what is that worth if it steals your soul, if you're not willing to do for others? Who you are now, is that going to change? Would you not help someone now? Would you not be willing to help a mother and her child? You know, you've got to consider these things as well. And I've heard people before go, well, if somebody comes up to my house, you know, and even if it's a woman and child, I'm not giving them anything because they may have people over here that are hiding in the bushes that want to know what we have. Yeah, you know, I understand that, but guys, let's just be practical. We've got to not get into this paranoid mind and kind of back off a little bit, understand the risk and the dangers, and act accordingly. And then continue to be human. Continue to be human. You don't want to get completely absorbed. Now, let me give you this, and then we're going to go to some more questions if we have time. The end all, if you're at the point to where you're locked down in a bunker and you just have all your supplies and you are like, and your life is completely consumed with prepping and what's the next thing I can get? What's the next gun I can get? What's the next, you know, this and that? More ammunition, I'm all about it. You can't have enough ammo. Listen, and if you don't have ammo right now, ammo and guns are, it is a buyer's market right now because of Trump and a lot of the laws that have been overturned. So the gun sales are down and gun companies are selling. So, hey, then now's a great time to buy. I call it my 401g. Buy your, have your self-defense, have your ammunition. But here's the deal. The real next step to hoarding up a bunch of stuff is to start homesteading. Grow a garden. Get some chickens. Have some eggs. Maybe buy rabbit. Rabbits are great. Rabbits are a great prepper resource. Goats. If you have enough property, have horses, and you have a mode of transportation. If you're that worried about the end of the world, which it's coming again, it's just all about timing, then start to become more self-sufficient. We have a lot of friends that are becoming more and more self-sufficient. We're doing the same thing. We're working toward being more self-sufficient because you can buy all the MREs that are in the country and have them stacked to the ceiling. But the best way to do it is to move toward healthy, fresh. You're living more with the earth, and you're understanding things a little bit better, and you have a sustainable way to continue on. Do we need self-defense for that? Yes, you do, because people may want to take that. And that's why, to me, having a good prepper group is vital. Not antisocial tendencies. Back off from that. Not paranoid delusion. One thing that I was talking about in a meeting one time, we were talking about possible dirty bomb, where they bring in a nuclear device and they set it off in a city. And there was a guy there that had been prior military, and he had worked with a lot of, he was in explosives. And he said, look, he goes, they have detectors in entrances like to New York City. They have radiation detectors that are at the front of the city. They will locate that immediately. Plus, it's very heavy. There's a lot of things about it. And he started talking about it, and the chances of them getting a dirty bomb into New York City are low. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible, because it is, are low. So it made me kind of step back and go, okay, well, I'm going to bring that down, my threat assessment, to down here. Whereas because I didn't really know a lot about it, I had it up here. So you want to make sure that you're being sensible, you're being rational, and stay rational. Okay, we've got some more questions. We can.
Private Eyes 888 says, I live in upstate New York. They have some of the strictest, if not the strictest, gun laws in the country. What would you recommend for me as far as semi-automatic rifle that is New York compliant?
I know that Dark Storm Industries was making firearms, and they're in New York. They were making firearms for every state, compliant to every state. But let me say this. I think a lever, now it doesn't have magazines, but I think a lever action rifle is a great choice. Now, again, doesn't have magazines, it's not going to be as quick, but they're fast. They're fast guns. That is a good possibility. If you can find something that, like Henry is making some really excellent, like their Homesteader. That's a 9mm, but especially some of Henry's now, some of their rifles that they do that are more just basic. I'm getting ready to review an AR, and I think it's Bear Creek Armory. They have a bolt action AR. And I don't know if that's compliant. I mean, I'm sure it is. It's bolt action. But I like to have something that's a little bit quick. So according to magazine capacity, you've got maybe 10 rounds. I think it's in New York. I believe it's limited to 10 rounds. So, you've got to think about that. I know in California, you have to have a button. You have to have a tool to get the magazine out. That makes it kind of slow. But still faster than a lot of other options. So look for something. Again, the Henry is just it's a 9mm, but it takes your Glock mags. You can just if you can only use your 10 rounders. It's quick to be able to drop that mag and put another one in if you need to. But one thing that I've been talking about lately is lever action rifles, and they've really put out some very great designs that are very modular and even have M-lock rails and things like that on them. So if you don't go with semi-automatic, that might be a good choice. And there are some states that are having some issues with semi-automatics.
Krista will ask, hey, Don and Sarah, can you guys suggest any good books for natural medicines and remedies and foraging for safe foods in the woods?
There are quite a bit of books out there. My wife is really, she specializes in that. She has some books. I know there is one book that's a classic, that Where There Are No Doctors. That's a great book. But there's been a lot of advances. One thing that we're working on right now is doing about dandelions. And dandelions are a great food source, but they're also a great health source. But knowing those things, mushrooms are definitely one of those that you got to really know what you're doing. So then there was one that we did. There was one book that I got, and I think it's called The Old Ways. Can't remember exactly but it goes into a lot of the ways that people traditionally have done things. And there's a lot of information in there. I think it's The Lost Ways. And it's a pretty decent book. It has a lot of things in there. In fact, even the SAS Survival Guide, he goes into a lot of things. And this is an older book. It's been around for a while. He goes into a lot of things about edible plants. One thing about pine trees, the cambia, when you pull the bark off, there's this like strips of stuff that's between it and the actual wood. And you can actually grind it up. You can cook it on a grill. You can eat it. You can take pine needles and you can boil them in water, and it creates vitamin C. It's funny because pine, you think of the resin. Of course, the resin gives you a fire starting capability, like fat wood. But there are so many different things. And I wish I could just give you you need to do this book. And maybe that's something that I need to kind of do some research. So Sarah Mack will put that down. But yeah, getting to those natural and the edibles. But there's a lot of books out there that do talk about edibles and finding things. There are some clubs. I know when we were living up in Western North Carolina, there was a club that was a mushroom club, and they would go into the woods, and the guy really knew what he was doing, and he would help people to be able to identify mushrooms that were good and bad and things like that. So there could be something like that around. One thing that I do want to throw out there is on Facebook. A lot of times they have groups. And like for us, we have where we live in South Carolina, in the upstate of South Carolina, there's the Upstate Preppers group. And they'll have a big meeting with the group. You just come in, you're anonymous. You just kind of come in, you can talk, you can network and get to know people. And there's a lot of resources with doing that. And so maybe in your area, look for a prepping or wherever you are, upstate prepping group. And then, and there's probably, and I know there are groups that actually do food foraging and looking for different type foods. So I wish I could give you a book, but I think The Lost Ways is one maybe to go to, and then some other books.
Bob asks, what are the best canned foods for long-term storage?
The one great thing about canned food, especially today, is number one, they line the cans now. And that was one thing they didn't do early on. So you'd get a metallic taste if it sat for too long because the metal would actually leach. So they had these can liners. Canned food, because of the heat processes and the sanitary conditions, will last pretty much, and I won't say indefinitely, but within your lifetime. We have gotten to the point where we are big on canned food because a lot of it is the way it's processed, like Denny Moore beef stew. It's a great way to store up some meat, and it'll last for a long time. Some things that have high acid, like pineapple or oranges and things like that, can start to work on the can itself. But just because it says best by date, with the technology they have now and the processes, canned food will last for decades. Now, canned food's heavy, so that's one thing you need to consider. But definitely, it is one of our major stored food resources. And there's a number of different the sky's the limit. But make sure you have a balance. You want vegetables, you want some meat, you want some fruits, you want some things that have balance to your diet, because you don't want to just stock up beans and rice, which make a complete protein, but you need those other things. And having a small garden, guys, again, is going to be vital, because it's going to give you that fresh fruit if you can't get it somewhere, or fresh food if you can't get it somewhere else. Okay, we're about 1 o'clock. So again, a big thank you to Exotac. 20% off using Suits20 with the link down below the description. You need a fire kit, guys. Fire kits are vital. Go buy Suits gear and check out our new Sensible Prepper t-shirts and also our Suits t-shirts that we've and ball caps. And we do have a sweepstakes over there. Run over there, get on the email list, and you can sign up. And it's just a great way to, and two, we do newsletters. We have a lot of stuff over there. And so check out suitsgear.com. And then, of course, the the modern survival guide for the coming economic collapse by Verfal. Link down below in the description. Great book about actual events that happened in Argentina with an economic collapse. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I know it was one of those things where there was a lot of information. The big thing I wanted to make sure is to stay balanced. Stay balanced in your prepping. You'll last longer. You won't burn out. And you can kind of make it into your lifestyle. Stay away from the paranoia, the delusions. If all heck breaks loose, you know, you're going to be more balanced, even if that happens, if you are balanced now. Big thanks to Sarah Mack. You have Seth over there helping out as well. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.